So hi everybody. I will talk today about UEFI and a new way to build a bootkit for Windows 8. Before beginning, I just want to show you a graph about the current boot process in a classical way with BIOS. So we have the BIOS firmware which load the master boot record, which is still executed in real mode. The master boot record next loads NT-loader, or since Vista and 7, the boot MGR and WinLoad binary are used to load the NTOS kernel image in memory. Next, it's a traditional kernel initialization with a hardware abstraction layer, Windows logo, system registry, memory management, and so on. And next, user-learned environment is ready. With UEFI, there is nothing that really changed in the Windows boot process. Only change are, of course, in the firmware. The UEFI replaces the BIOS. And the first stage bootloader, this time do not rely on BIOS, but firmware API. So first I will introduce UEFI. What does it mean? A brief comparison with BIOS. Next I will show you how to develop on UEFI. How does it work? Which kind of API? And next I will make a focus on the Windows boot process and how we could corrupt the kernel to execute our own code and develop payloads in userland. So I've built my own bootkit implementation which target Windows 8 with 2 payloads. I will come back later on this. So UEFI in a nutshell. UEFI means Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. So to resume, it's a common import of different manufacturers, mainly Intel and Microsoft. But there are other manufacturers, big ones, but main are Intel and Microsoft. So the main objective of UEFI is to modernize the boot process. It's an open source project. Specifications are free, available on the official UEFI consortium, UEFI.0rg. There is two acronyms of UEFI. Before there was EFI, and next UEFI. So that's almost the same. Just EFI was the first version launched more than 10 years ago. I think it was Apple who used first EFI for their hardware. Today, since almost 2006, EFI became UEFI, and the current release is 2.31. UEFI is retrocompatible with a previous version, so you can call the same API. But now just some fact about UEFI and our current desktop station or laptop. Many hardware are today shipped with a custom version of UEFI, some kind of hybrid mode, which rely on CSM, compatibility support module. In fact, it's an hybrid version where UEFI firmware still rely on BIOS interruption to handle some kind of hardware. But there are many, many more full UEFI hardware, like laptops, for some months. Just to explain you, the whole firmware is written in C language. It's almost more than 1 million of code lines. Everything has been written from scratch. It supports classical CPU like ARM and x34, Windows, Linux, and Apple, of course. Apple just introduced some specific feature in its EFI implementation to support their custom hardware. So globally, we have a different phase before loading the first boot manager. The first phase is sec. It's mainly the firmware which operates integrity check on itself, just to check everything is okay. Another important phase is the pre-initialization phase with the initialization of the processor. For example, to directly switch in protected mode or long mode for a 64 processor. The chipset and the motherboard, which is initiated in this phase. Next, it's the most important part in the firmware. In fact, in this phase, all UEFI modules are loaded in memory. In fact, it's a driver to support the hardware, the network card, graphic card, and so on, and the specific protocol too, network protocol. Next, UEFI try to load the boot manager, which is stored at a fixed location, and next the bootloader has to load the operating system in memory. So that's the TSL phase. And next is a classical operating system execution, runtime. And what is funny in the specification is that you can find a question mark for the last phase, afterlife. In fact, in this last phase, it's the UEFI firmware execute some code before the operating system is executed again. Could be interesting to hook some function which handle the hibernation in a UEFI to inject some code. Why not? If we compare UEFI and BIOS, when we had BIOS in our hardware, it was first executed in protected mode. Next, the BIOS switch again in real mode, and before loading the master boot record and execute it. So BIOS had difficulty to handle high capacity hard drive. It's still very old school to develop on BIOS. You only have access to 1 megabyte of memory, and it's very boring to develop on it. With UEFI, it's quite easy to develop things like bootloader, for example, or bootkits. In fact, with UEFI, the master boot record is completely removed. It is replaced by a fate partition, and you can put a binary on it. All binaries use the PI format from Microsoft. What is interesting is the binary are directly executed in protected mode, long mode, and you can just develop your own things directly in a C language with a high-level API. So yes, just to remember BIOS, when BIOS was there, and the real mode addressing, so you had 1 megabyte of memory. It was very boring to develop on it. You only have few memory, fixed address to write on the video frame buffer. It was very boring, and today it's a bit old school to develop like that. So on BIOS, we had interruption before. So if you remember a classical interruption for video, 10, 13 for hard drives, and so on. There was no memory management. If you want to tell to BIOS you have allocated some memory, you need to declose a word at fixed address, for example, and many things like that. On UEFI, it's quite easy. Everything is handled by the firmware. In fact, it's a real operating system. You even have a TCP/IP stack, VGA driver, many things. And of course, Secure Boot, which has been introduced to develop a trust chain between the firmware and the operating system execution with certificate and so on. For UEFI development, before we had the first SDK in EFI, so it's a bit. It was some year ago. What is interesting is you can find a lot of insecure functions, like the classical string copy, sprintf, and so on. And today they are still used in the current firmware. So if you just grab the source code, you can find many references to the function. And many modules rely on those functions, like driver to handle the TCP/IP stack. So it's a bit crazy. I do not have made vulnerability analysis directly on the firmware. I just have made a focus on bootkits, but I'm pretty sure there are many potential vulnerabilities. If you have a look at just some modules that are loaded at start, here is just a sample. You can find many protocols are written from scratch for doing DHCP, IPsec, USB, many things. I will talk to you about development, UEFI development. It's quite easy to develop using Microsoft tools like Visual Studio. They just introduced a new constant in the PI format for new UEFI subsystem. It's a EFI underscore application. There is the same for driver or for custom firmware, for example. So today the UEFI SDK is quite clear. You have separation between package for doing cryptographic stuff, network, security, and so on. You even have a custom firmware emulator where you can check if your custom firmware is working well or your application. You have an integrated shell, UEFI shell. the framework is available on SourceForge. The repository is called ChanoCore. First time I see ChanoCore, I found this a bit strange, as UEFI has been designed by Intel and Microsoft, and you can only download the full SDK on SourceForge, ChanoCore, and another seed. I thought it was, I think it will be better to be Intel seed or Microsoft, but it's a bit difficult to understand who do what in the consortium. So here it is a typical application, Hello World, with a high-level function. UEFI only use Unicode strings, just some fact. What's interesting there is UEFI main arguments. You can find a EFI handle, so just a reference to the current Lloyded application. Most interesting parameter is the system table. In fact, it's the main entry point to the firmware to call most API. So from the system table, you can access different objects and primitives, like boot services, runtime services, to write things on the console, allocate memory, send a packet over the network, launch process. You can do many high-level things. So it's a pure C language, but we can say it's object-oriented programming in C. In fact, you can use a UEFI object using a specific function called locate protocol. In fact, every UEFI service are called protocol in the specification. And locate protocol lets you retrieve custom structure with some field and a callback to call directly the firmware. Each protocol has a unique identifier in the firmware. Everything is published in specification. Here is just an example for the graphic card. So it's not really interesting. Just to show you how you can use a protocol, here is just a short extract of the bootkit, which try to find the Windows bootloader on disk. So in this case, we use a file system protocol. Next, we use the handle protocol API to retrieve a custom object. Next, to call some function like open volume, open, close, just to check files are there on a file system. So in this case, we try to check where the Windows bootloader is located. In this case, there is no, you can't use a command path to reference file. You have to use the UEFI PCU abstraction to detect file on disk. The UEFI consortium has also implemented some kind of makefile to just let you put what are your source, your library dependencies, on which packages you depend. That's quite easy to use. Here is an UEFI shell example. UEFI shell is just a a specific UEFI application, which is shipped with most firmware. With this shell, you can do many things like mounting drive, browsing them, checking with which modules are loaded, have a look at the memory map, ICPI table. You can do many things for debugging purposes. But with all that, what about security? In fact, there is not many things. For example, if you look at the memory, there are absolutely no protection. Everything is trusted. All pages are read, write, execute. So that's quite easy to manipulate. Also, as I said before, they implemented a custom version of the cell library, so it could be a security risk. If we take the example of the TCP/IP stack, which rely on this custom C library, I think they made some mistake. Not sure, but I think there are potential vulnerabilities. I have not checked that part, but pretty sure. However, we can say a secure boot has been introduced to build a trust chain with a firmware which check if the bootloader is digitally signed. Next, the bootloader try to verify if other binary code are again digitally signed. But that's the same for secure boot. Most of its components have been developed from scratch. For example, for PO parsing, handling certificate, every cryptographic primitive have been written from scratch. Donc, I think there is many things to do, and maybe in the future I will work on this. What about debugging now? I've tried to debug the UEFI, some UEFI binary using VirtualBox, which support natively EFI. But main issue is VirtualBox is not able to boot Windows 8. Maybe it has changed for last month, but when I built the bootkit, there was an open ticket on VirtualBox site, I think for 2 or 3 years, about a problem with UEFI and Windows 7, UEFI, Windows 8, and nothing happened. So it does not work. With VMware, it works very well. Just a line to add in the main VMX file. Firmware equal EFI, quite easy. And you can activate the GDB stub to do remote debugging. So if we come back to the UEFI boot process, there are many things interesting to debug. In case of bootkit, it's interesting to try to debug the Windows bootloader. In fact, there are 2 bootloaders. First one is boot MGFW and WinLoad. So it's interesting to debug them and to validate, for example, bootkit is working okay. So if we take the first bootloader, boot MGFW, it's easy to break in it using the GDB stub. The binaries are already is always loaded at the same address, so it's quite easy to put a breakpoint. You can also add with some plugin to some script with to GDB to have symbol. it's possible. But maybe the best way to do it is to activate the WinDBG stub in the other loader. In fact, you can activate debug mode in both bootloaders. So for the first one, you just have to activate boot debug with classical thing for serial debugging. For the first stage bootloader, you need to put another parameter to activate the first stub. However, we do not find how to use the first stub. In fact, if you use WinDBG on the first bootloader, there are some bad value for segment register. In fact, CS and SS had bad values, so we can't single step in the code without manually changing them. So it does not work really good. However, for WinLoad, it's not everything is okay. You just have to use a SXE command, WinDBG command, to break when WinLoad starts. So now, what about Dreambot? It's a Windows 8 bootkit. It works only for 64 processor. In fact, it's just a PI binary, which could be stored on an ISO, for example. We just need a FAT32 partition. So the implementation I made is just one way to do the job, but there is plenty of ways to corrupt the Windows kernel and do what you want. So my idea with Dreambot is to execute some code in userland. First idea is to bypass local authentication, a bit like the tool called Conboot, if you know it. So you just boot from the ISO and just press enter when the logging prompt appears, and you are authenticated. And next I made a second payload with a classical privilege escalation. So it does not exploit any vulnerability, as the bootkit is loaded before the kernel, but it was just for fun. So how to do that? We will mainly hook the full Windows boot process. So first we will hook the two first bootloader, boot MGFW and WinLoad, and next the kernel. But there is just some trick to deactivate some kernel protection to make it work. For payload development, we use the PS set load notify routine. We just insert callback in the system, which is called when new process are spawned or new DLL are loaded. So just to remember the global Windows process, boot process. So we have the first boot manager which is executed. In fact, it loads the BCD store, and next transfers the execution flow to a second loader, which is WinLoad, which do the same this time, but with the kernel. And next, the KI system startup, the kernel main function, is called directly from from WinLoad. And next is a classical kernel initialization process. And after we have the session management subsystem, which is load, login prompt API, user run environment is ready. So we just have to hook everything to and sometimes relocate our code. We will see why. So first stage is to hook the boot MGFW loader. In fact, we will hook a specific function which is in charge of transferring the execution flow from the first bootloader to the second one. It's the best place to put a hook, I think, because we have directly a pointer to WinLoad, to its code. So it will be easier in our hook to put a second hook on the WinLoad itself. In practice, it's quite easy. In this first stage, we can develop the bootkit in C language. There is no problem with memory independent code. So we can use directly firmware API. The first thing to do is to locate the bootloader on disk. So it's quite easy. That's what we have seen before with file I/O protocol. Next, we need to load the binary in memory. It's quite easy with UEFI. Just call the native function load image, and you have the binary which is mapped in memory. Next, we just use the loaded image protocol to retrieve information about the last loaded module. For example, it's image base, size, and so on. But the image base is enough because we just want to put a hook on code. So next, we made a classical pattern search in memory, and we can put our hook on a specific function. And next, we can transfer the execution flow to the Windows bootloader just by using a start image function. So that's very, very easy to make the first level. So here's the disassembly slice of the function we hooked. In fact, it's very difficult to pronounce it, but this function transfers the execution flow to WinLoad when call REX is executed. Just before you have a new IDT, GDT, which is initialized, and CR3 register, which is used to CR4 for memory management. So we just patch this call to go into our code, and from our code we will directly call the WinLoad entry point. So next, we have now a hook in WinLoad bootloader, the second bootloader. We just need now to put a second hook when WinLoad will transfer the execution flow to the NTOS kernel. And there we will try to deactivate some protection like page guard or the NX bit. And we will hook some other kernel function. We will see that later. So how to do it? That's exactly the same procedure with the first bootloader. We will patch the OSL arc transfer to kernel function just before the kernel entry point is called. So it's exactly the same. The call is made there with the readfq instruction. So we just have to replace the instruction with on, and everything is okay. And next from hook, we will call the kernel entry point. So now in this hook, we have to deactivate some protection because at first all our code were in the initial UEFI mapping memory, but now we will relocate the code inside the kernel itself. In fact, I've done it in its relocation table. So when the kernel is loaded in memory, its relocation table is not used anymore, so we can put code there. But the page, the associated page, are not executable. So it's due to NX bit, so we need to deactivate it in the kernel in the first initialization phase. The NX bit is quite easy to deactivate if you have the full control of the kernel. So we can find the associated code very easily. With IDA, for example, you just have to do some cross-reference on the string no execute, which is a parameter for BCD edit tool if you want to deactivate NX. So we just have to page just jump to jump over this code and never execute it, and the NX bit will not be activated. But if we only do that, we have a typical blue screen of death, in French in this case, with critical structure corruption exception. In this case, it's PageGuard who detect bad thing happen. In fact, it detects the code which has been injected in a relocation table. I don't know how, maybe with some integrity check or thing like that. So now I've looked for PageGuard and a way to deactivate it. It's quite easy to find the function which initializes PageGuard. In fact, if you have the official debug symbol, PageGuard could be found under the KI init AMD 64 specific state. It's quite obfuscated, but not really, in fact. PageGuard is activated only on the kernel which are not debugged. So in fact, Microsoft implement a specific trick which rely on the faulting division. In fact, when the kernel is not debugged, the division fail, an exception is launched, and next catch it, and it launches the PageGuard initialization process. So we just have to page in this function this boolean to let the kernel know it's not debugged. So the exception will never be thrown, and PageGuard will not be activated, and it's not detected after, and it works very well. So it was very easy to deactivate PageGuard in this case because it's not currently executed, so it's quite easy. So it's just, if you look at the Dreamboot code, it's just a classical patch, NeoP patch, or conditional jump, inversion, very classical. So now we have deactivated some kernel protection, NX and PageGuard. We just need to find a way to execute code while userland environment is deployed. So I just found a little trick. My idea is to put a hook on the NT set information thread API. And there I will call a specific payload to which will call the PS load image notify routine. So just before letting the kernel be executed, I parse some export to use them in the first payload stage in the hook of NT set information thread, in fact. So I just resolve some function. My idea is to break on this function because it could only be called on an initialized kernel. Generally, this function is called when the first userland process are spawned, typical subsystem management process, SMSS. It's maybe the first process which calls this API. So now the kernel has been initialized. First userland process are launched. So we break into a hook in NT set information thread. But we still have an issue because our code has been relocated in the kernel relocation table. But on the userland environment is deployed, the kernel put some page tagged as discardable, so everything is not accessible anymore from memory. So we need to move again the bootkit in memory. In this case, I have allocated legitimate memory using kernel API xallocate pool, classical one, with non-paged pool execute flag, which has been introduced with Windows 8. And next, I copy the bootkit code into this memory location. And next, in this code, I can now call the PS set load image notify routine to develop the final payload. And so the first one, which bypass local authentication, and the second one, which do a privilege escalation. So now let's go with payloads. Just a little trick to apply patch in memory. I forgot that before. We have to use the CR0 register to deactivate the WP bit, the write protect flag. So in fact, we have to erase this bit in CR0 before doing patch from kernel to userland, or from kernel to kernel. So for first payload, the local authentication bypass. So nothing really new. It's just a page in MSVP password validate inside MV1_0 DLL. So I just have paged the return of RTL compare memory while comparing NTLM digest. So everything is fine with notify callback. because in a callback parameter, we have everything to do a patch. The image base, the image size, the PID. So it's very easy to patch next. For privilege escalation, it's also quite easy. Just use a classical DKOM technique, which manipulate directly eProcess structure. The main idea is to browse a circular list called active process links. It's a circular list with our eProcess structure. So we just have to find just only one eProcess structure, and we can browse all of them. So my idea is to substitute the token field and replace it with a high privileged token. So my idea is to copy the token from a system process, which has always the same PID 4, and we can do the escalation, privilege escalation. So just one way to retrieve eProcess structure is to look at the PS get current process disassembly, 2 lines of code. We just retrieve the eProcess structure from kPCR, and at some of that you have the eProcess structure. Of course, it depends of the current operating system, but it's at a fixed address. So next, the main idea is to browse the circular list 2 times. One time to look for system process, get its token. Second time to look for the CMD process and replace its token with the system one. We also just put the low bit of the token to 0. In fact, it's just a kernel counter to check how many times the token is referenced inside the kernel. So now just a little demo. So here I have a Windows 8 virtual machine. My computer is a bit slow, so sorry. So I just have a classical account protected by a password. So there, I just open a session. And next I will reboot on the Dreamboot ISO. So in my virtual machine setting, I have the Dreamboot ISO, which is there. Okay. So let the session be open. So I just reboot the virtual machine. I think I will take the video. It will be faster. So here I go. Resolution is quite low. Is a UEFI shell. In this case, I'm booting from the ISO. So now I've just patched the first bootloader. Maybe I will check. Il est toujours en train de redémarrer. So just made some little graphics, a bit old school. Because with UEFI, you can use a graphic protocol and use a high-level API with a few graphic card and have big resolution, 32 colors, many things. Maybe OpenGL soon, we don't know. So next, Windows boot process continue till the login prompt. Now we can just enter a blank password to unlock the station. And next, when we launch CMD console, the token has been changed to system. So just a whoami command. And we are now system. Yes. Sorry for the demo, my virtual machine is... Oh, it has rebooted finally. So to conclude, the source code is available on GitHub since yesterday. There is a full source code and also the experimental ISO. So if you want to try it, if you find bugs, tell me. Next, I plan to continue the Dreamboot development, maybe to support more architecture, maybe 86, and also previous version of Windows, maybe just from Windows 7. I think too about other way to do the job. For example, in the first phase, I directly hook the Windows bootloader, but why not directly hooking the firmware? It's possible, and inject the code directly in the firmware. As the bootloader, both bootloaders have to rely on the UEFI API. We can trigger our code when, for example, the native function exit boot services is called, generally just before the kernel entry point is called. So it's an ID. Another way maybe to do it is to allocate reserved memory with UEFI internal function And next, this memory normally could not be used by the operating system. So it's maybe an easier idea to hide the bootkit code in memory and avoid the two-stage relocation in the NTOS relocation table next with xallocate pool. So maybe we can avoid many relocation by reserved specific memory with UEFI. Next, I think there is a lot of things to do only with the firmware, some vulnerability research. If you are interested do not hesitate to contact me. I'm interested too. And of course, it could be very interesting to look at secure boot because actually the bootkit do not bypass anything, do not bypass secure boot. If it is activated, it will not work as it's not digitally signed. So I think there is many things to check in secure boot. So as most thing in the UEFI has been rewritten from scratch, there are potential vulnerabilities in it. Well, thank you for your attention.